Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Joe Woolley, and I am CEO of the Nashville LGBT Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us for our May Classroom Connect educational series, sponsored by HCA Healthcare and TriStar Health. We are streaming live to Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, through the program StreamYard. We are going to be able to take your comments through those platforms with any questions or input that you might have during the presentation. Questions will be addressed during the Q&A session at the end of the program, but I'll cut in and talk to our presenter if those questions needs to be answered right away for some clarity. This program is part of the Rainbow Connection series. This series includes networking events, educational opportunities, and connections. Check out our website for more information on upcoming events. We've got Network Connect, Member Connect, and then this program, Classroom Connect. It's sponsored by our platinum level member, HCA Healthcare, TriStar Health. Thank you to them. We could not have done this program without them. We're wrapping up this series next month in June, and it's going to be on the Pride. It's going to be about the business of Pride. You don't want to miss that one. You haven't wanted to miss any of these Classroom Connect programs that we've brought you over the last year virtually. We're going to continue our educational series in the fall. Those will be hybrid events, in person and online, with new sponsors, new topics, covering up many different things that our members are interested in. All those other events, look for our full event schedule for June and Pride Month coming to you on next Tuesday, June 1st. We've got a busy month in store with lots of fun and exciting programming. We're going to wrap up May strong on a high note with this Classroom Connect program. So let's get started. I am really excited to hear about this month's event. This session will be led by Robert Anstett, who owns Southport Solutions, a cloud service provider and a custom software development company. Robert has a degree in computer engineering and a master's in management of technology. He has worked as a flight control engineer on military programs and lead project engineer for several startup companies. Robert's been developing software and cloud solutions for 14 years, so he is a true expert. For 10 years, Robert has served on the National Technology Committee for the Boy Scouts of America. Boy Scouts of America's National Honor Society, driving the transition to cloud services for that organization. Southport Solutions is a member of the Nashville LGBT Chamber, and they are one of our certified LGBT business enterprises. Robert, it is so good to have you today. Thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to hear about this, to learn more, and then really learn what the cloud is and what it can do, and hear about your expertise. Thanks for doing this for us.
Great, thanks, Joe. I'm so excited to be here and share my knowledge with everybody. I'd like to first, of course, thank the Chamber for having these wonderful Classroom Connect sessions. I've attended several of them, and I have definitely expanded my knowledge as a business owner. As you know, you wear many hats, and as you probably heard, I'm an engineer at heart, really, and so being a business owner, I've definitely had to grow into that, and so these sessions have been great. Today, I really am excited to talk about cloud solutions. There's many different levels of cloud solutions, and we're going to really scratch the surface and only scratch the surface of what cloud computing is. And I'm excited to share that knowledge with you. And in fact, many of you already probably use cloud services on a daily basis. You just don't realize that that's what it's called. So there's three different flavors of cloud services, and we'll talk about those in a minute. I want to give you some examples, though, of some companies that offer different cloud services. So if Lauren, if you could go to the next slide. If you use, for instance, Office 365 or HubSpot or even Adobe Creative Cloud, other services also include things like Ring Central and Shopify. Square is another example. These are all services that allow you to pay for using the service, based on a resource level based, and it's always over some period of time that you get access to that service. And usually they're less expensive than having to go out and buy the full software. I remember a long time ago when Adobe was still selling their Creative Suite, and it would cost you $1,000 to buy everything. And today you're able to pay for the entire suite for somewhere around $50 a month, and you get a lot more services on top of just getting that software. So why don't we move on to the next slide? So this is where I really want to talk about the different types of cloud services. And there's 3 levels that you can work in within the cloud. There's the first level, which is called infrastructure as a service. This level is, think of it more of a traditional data center offering. It allows you to have a lot more flexibility. You can have virtual machines. You can use services within these organizations or within these offerings, but they give you a lot of flexibility. You have a lot of control over different pieces, but the offering also controls a lot of things that you don't then need to deal with as well, like some like software licensing and things like that. And what you do, again, is you pay for that service only for the time period that you need it. So unlike going to, say, a data center or anything like that, where you have to rent a server for a year, let's say, and you're going to spend $5,000 for that rental, and you only really need that server for, say, a month, you can go to one of these offerings and rent essentially that resource for that 1 month. And then you can release it back into the cloud and allow that resource to be used elsewhere. The next level down is called platform as a service. This is, you have less flexibility than infrastructure as a service. So you're not necessarily renting a virtual machine. Instead, you're buying a prepackaged service that gives you full access into being able to, say, host a website. So rather than having to go get a virtual machine and have to manage the operating system and all the security around that, you're now able to, say, go and just rent a service to host your website. And all it does is host your website. And as a result, the service takes care of a lot of the security and the networking and the licensing and all of that. And all you need to worry about is how your application interacts with the service and with the outside world. So it removes a lot of that complexity and a lot of that time that it takes to bring up a new application. And then the last one, which is probably the one that most businesses, especially small businesses, are familiar with, and that's software as a service. Prime examples of that are Office 365, Google Workspace, Zoom, Slack. StreamYard is a great example as well, where you're using a fixed resource. They have full control over the security of it, of the actual, how the application works. All of that stuff is done by the operator and is able to, but gives you access into that service that you wouldn't normally have access into if you had to build it yourself, for instance. And so software as a service is definitely the one that you're familiar with. You just may not have known that's what it's called. So Lauren, if we go to the next slide, this will give you a good example of the different levels that of what you need to manage versus what the platform manages. So if you have on-premise data center or servers, you manage the whole thing. This is what's called a stack. So you manage the full on-premise stack, everything from the applications to the networking. But then when you go to infrastructure as a service, all of the networking and the storage and the servers and the virtualization of the server, they're all managed by the provider. So you can really focus your efforts into your application and what you're trying to do. Platform as a service takes that even further, where you don't need to manage the operating system. All you have to manage is your application and your data. And then finally, software as a service is the provider manages all of that for you. And so it's these different levels that give you the different sets of flexibility depending on what you're trying to do. So the next thing I want to show you is an example, a financial example of what it's like to, need to open a company. You've got 25 users. You need to provide file shares. You need to provide email, security around your network, all of that type of stuff. You need to provide productivity software. So you're looking at probably a minimum of about $30,000 in sunk capital costs to go out and buy the server, buy some backup solution, buy licenses. And I might be very conservative on the $5,000 for licenses. It could be a lot more depending on what you're doing. Spend $10,000 just on productivity licenses for your users. You have to pay an IT company to set it up. And then you've got ongoing support, both in maintenance for the software and IT support. Versus if you go to that cloud, you get, for $6,000 a year, you get all of that productivity. You get the email hosting, you get file storage, you get collaboration tools that you don't get with the self-hosting. And you're talking about $6,000 in licensing costs, $1,000 to set it up, have somebody set it up for you, and then an ongoing management fee, probably about $2,400 for a service firm to manage it for you. So it's a 3.5, 4 year payoff, cloud versus self-hosting. And you get a lot more out of that cloud offering because the company is able to provide so many more services when you're using their servers. So a prime example of this is Microsoft Office 365. You get the email, you get the Office productivity, you get Teams, you get, and then within Teams, you get video calling and meetings and all that type of stuff. You get 1 terabyte of file storage per user. You can also install the Office 365 offline clients on 5 computers for each user. So you get a lot more that comes with that cloud offering. So it's a great way for businesses, especially small businesses, to conserve capital and just use your ongoing operating revenues and expenses to pay for your IT costs. So Lauren, if we go to the next slide, this goes straight into what I'm talking about, where you go spend $30,000. That's $30,000 of sunk costs. To be able to actually operate your IT. You do get, there are advantages to that. You get perpetual use. You have now full control over all your data. There are instances where you may need to do that because you're in a regulated industry. Think healthcare, finance, some forms of government work, defense, things like that. But at the same time, the trade-off is now you have to manage it. You have a fixed resource. So as your business grows, it's more difficult to grow that resource without spending a lot more money a lot more capital to bring additional resources in. And Lauren, if we go to the next slide. So the operating expenses, on the other hand, are when it comes to the cloud, is that you have an ongoing recurring expense. So rather than spending $30,000 up front, you're going to spend $6,000 or $7,000 in your first year of using that service, and it's built out over time. But what you get is you free up $20,000 of money that you would otherwise had to spend on your IT. And let's face it, you can't operate a business today without having some form of IT. And so being able to free up that capital to invest elsewhere that is maybe more money making than in your IT costs, then that's a great way to help grow your business. Now, granted, over the course of time, the actual expense could be higher because you no longer have that IT asset that you can use for 10 years. So over the course of those 10 years, you're going to spend $60,000 instead of say 30, but more than likely you're going to have to, you're not just going to be spending that one-time 30 over 10 years. You're probably going to be rebuying hardware and licenses and all of that stuff over the course of that time. So, so cloud can be a little bit more expensive over time, but it all depends on what you're trying to do with your money, and money and time, time costs, can balance that out for you. So all of these resources, as I said before, they're all billed based on your resource level and time. So for instance, a good example would be, say, Zoom. When you go to Zoom, they have several different offerings. So you can pay for a 1-year license for, their base one, I think, is $160 a year. And you get up to, I think, 100 people for a Zoom call. You could also go out and buy their webinar functionality, and that's, I don't even remember how much that is, but say it's $100 over the course of that year, but maybe now you get 500 people that you can get on there on top of your 100. So you're paying for it based on your resource level. So you get the 100 people, and over the course of a year, or the webinar when we get 500 people over the course of a year. All of these cloud services are like that. Yes, Joe.
Hey, Robert, I wanted to jump in on this point. Do you recommend people do buy that annual plan? I know a lot of the cloud services that I subscribe to, or that the chamber subscribes to, give you a significant, sometimes 20-25% discount if you sign up for a year. What do you recommend?
It depends on what you're trying to do. So if you you want to go with that service, you've tried it out, you're dead set, yes, we're going to spend this money and we're going to use this, absolutely. I also suggest to some people where, okay, you've done the trial, you like it, but you're not fully committed to it, sign up for a month and give yourself a little extra time, or I do this all the time. I'll email the company and I'll say, look, we've done the trial, we're still not sure, can you extend our trial? And so, we'll get another 2 weeks or something along those lines. But yeah, if you are fully committed, absolutely go save that money right off the top.
Sure.
It really, and I'm somebody who also likes a one bill. I don't like having to pay a bill over and over and over again. And so from an accounting perspective, I like that as well. So.
All right, good tip. Thank you.
Great. Okay, let's go to our next slide. This is where, aside from costs, this is where cloud computing and cloud services really allows you to take off. So there's these concepts of scale and elasticity. The concept of scale is that as your business grows, so today you're at 25 employees, a month from now, say you're at 35 employees, you're able to go and just add more licenses to whatever service you have. And so as your business grows, it can scale with you. Versus you have that fixed cost, you have that one server, and if you run out of resources on that server, you have to go spend more money to upgrade it. The idea of elasticity is a little different, where so I do, as Joe said in my bio, I do a lot of work with the Boy Scouts of America, and there's an event that we hold every other year for 8,000 people. And so part of our drive towards the cloud was because every other year we've got 2 months of a lot of people accessing our services. And so what we'll do is we'll scale up our resource level within our cloud services to 2 to 4 times what we normally have. But we only do it for a month or 2 months, depending on what we're doing. So you're able to then, all we're doing is we've maybe tripled or doubled or quadrupled our spend for those 2 months. But then once the event's over, we shrink everything back down to the level that we normally spend at. And so now you're able to dynamically allocate those resources depending on your level that you need. Software as a service can be a little bit more difficult with that. You need to talk to that vendor to see if you're able to scale up like that and scale down. Most of them allow you to do that. But that is something I know some, like you have to scale up for a particular period of time, especially if you're on an annual plan. So that may be an instance where going the monthly route might work out as well. When I'm talking about this elasticity concept, primarily I'm talking about that infrastructure or platform as a service, we're able to really scale and shrink back down. If you are in an organization that is going to, has to develop their own software in-house, this is also an area that's great because, we have to spin up test environments and development environments, and we can design the system so that it creates the resources for the testing when it needs to be done. And then when the testing is complete, it destroys those resources. So rather than paying for the resource all the time, you only pay for it for an hour or two, every couple of days. And so that is another way you're able to save money over the course of time. So this idea of scaling and elasticity is a really big driver with cloud services. Lauren, let's go to the next slide. Another great thing, and I run into clients every once in a while. I'll find a client. I've got one that I work with right now. We started out in their data center. It was always difficult for me since I don't work in their building. I have to VPN in, and there can be a lot of headache associated with that, or with other reasons that you can't, link into their data center.
Robert, you used a term. We're gonna try and dumb it down for people. You said you have to VPN in.
Okay.
What does that mean? I think you're talking about security and accessing. I think intranet used to be what it was called, but it's accessing somebody's servers, correct? And it's much easier and more secure for the cloud?
Yeah, so if you've ever heard of, you see the ads all the time for NordVPN and those types of things. What those are doing is creating what's called a tunnel from your computer to, say, Nord server. And so nobody from your computer to the Nord server can see what you're doing. And so, but then the Nord server just pushes that out to the internet. When you VPN into a data center for a business, what you're doing is you're creating that same private tunnel to the data center, and then you're able to access resources within the data center.
It's like you're moving inside the building, so to speak.
Yeah, and so a VPN is called a virtual private network, and that's the reason why it's called virtual, is because you've created essentially a tunnel into the private network.
Great. So, and then for that reason, cloud. Now you're going to explain why cloud kind of takes care of that issue. Yeah.
So with the cloud, the provider, especially so when it comes to SaaS services, there's no VPN. Most of the time you're accessing it through a web portal, or you've downloaded the application, Office 365 or Adobe, for instance. But if you're accessing Google, it used to be called Google. Oh, it's called Google Docs, but the Google services, they keep changing the name. But when you access those, you're going through a web browser. And so there's no need to VPN in anymore. When it comes to the infrastructure and platform, there's sort of a hybrid approach there. Sometimes you VPN in, sometimes you don't have to. But regardless, it still allows you to have that direct access to the resource when you're on the go. I can't count the number of times that I've been sitting on a flight and I've got Wi-Fi access and I've had to go do something, and thank God there's a web portal out there for me to go do it, because you can't really VPN in from a plane. So that mobility, that flexibility really gives you that advantage. When it comes to email, prime example, you have a server online and server in-house, you may need to VPN into that server to get your email, versus you have Google or Microsoft, you're able to just connect in and you get your email without needing any of that overhead. I timed this out last night and I'm definitely running a little behind. So why don't we go to the next slide? So security, this is a really, really important one. Recently, we've seen some very high profile ransomware attacks. In fact, one of my clients 2 months ago got hit with a ransomware attack, and they were still had a lot of stuff on premise that got encrypted. They opted to not pay the ransom. Thankfully, we were able to recover from it. But in the recovery, we ended up deciding to do a shift into the cloud. And when it comes to like a ransomware attack as a prime example, when we shifted into the cloud, we went to using all services within the cloud. So all their databases now live within what's called Azure SQL, We don't have to maintain the operating system, the security around it. Microsoft does that for us. We just need to maintain our databases. And so we have that disconnect now between the on-premise and the cloud. So when if they were to get hit with another ransomware attack, which would be unfortunate, their data would be safe. And there's some advantages to that. Now, don't get me wrong. There's also you also need to make sure you set up your security properly. But the provider can give you a lot of that extra security on top of it because they have a lot more resources to dedicate to it than most businesses, especially small businesses, do. There's also some really cool services out there now that for your on-prem computers and laptops and things like that, you can back those up into the cloud. And then if they do get hit with a ransomware attack, you can actually start those computers up in virtual machines in the cloud. So you're up immediately, you don't lose a beat. So there's these really cool services out there to allow you to do that as well. Security is a big important thing for businesses today, and cloud can provide a lot of advantages to that. It can also be a risk as well. I mean, just like any technology. So this is one of those things where you definitely want to talk to a cloud solutions provider to really understand, what needs to be done. Let's go to the next slide. Reliability. As I said earlier, the provider has more talent than your organization might for these especially for these infrastructure pieces. And so they're able to provide a more reliable situation. There's also these things called service level agreements. If you've ever signed an IT managed service agreement with an IT firm, you'll see the SLA, maybe referred to as service level agreement or SLA, which guarantees uptime. And unfortunately, Azure had an outage in March. It happens every once in a while, but this time it was bad enough where they activated their SLA. So we were able to get some funds back for some clients because of some downtime. So unfortunately, situations do happen. Situations happen, but it's at the same time can be more reliable than if you host it on your own. Another great thing, especially for businesses that are multinational or even span the whole continent, you can put your servers and your services where your customers are. If you're only here in Nashville, you can select the data center closest to us. That's not so the case with software with SaaS services, with software as a service. But if you're putting your data into an Azure or an AWS, you can choose a data center where it goes. And so it can live the closest to you or your customers, or both. Let's go to the next slide. Risk. So as with anything, there is risk. You are putting your business's hands into the hands of, you're putting your business's, the ability for your business to execute in the hands of another company. Think of Square or Shopify. These companies where if they do have an outage, there's a chance that your business could be down for a period of time while that outage is resolved. So there is some risk associated with that. Most of the time, though, I would say it's more reliable. Governance and compliance is very important. If you are a healthcare company, if you go to a organization that's providing software as a service, and you're going to put patient information in that service, you need to make sure you have that BAA in place and that they are operating in a HIPAA compliant way to cover your business and for them to cover themselves as well. So that's another piece that you need to take into consideration. And the last one is a big one too, cost management. So you're paying for a service, a resource level over time. And so if you go in and add 25 users to Office 365 and then add another 30 users on top of that, but you only really needed 20, it's you're paying for those 10 extra users for no reason, and I guarantee you Microsoft is going to bill you for it. And so that's just something that you need to keep an eye on. When you go to the platform as a service and infrastructure as a service, costs can rack up very, very quickly. And so having a cloud solutions provider can help ensure that costs are managed. And there are tools out there, especially with the Azures and AWSs of the world, that allows you to ensure that you're not exceeding your budgets and whatnot. So cost management can be a little bit of a risk, because rather than having a fixed cost every single month, it is billed based on your usage. Let's go to our next slide. So challenges, similar, just like with risk, you have that cost management. You can be walking into going into the cloud and not realize what your costs are going to be. It sometimes can be difficult, to be honest with you, to calculate what those costs are going to be. And so that's something that you need to work with, again, a cloud service provider, to sit down, calculate that cost out, at least estimate it out. And then, during those first few months, keep a very close eye on your expenditure level and your resourcing level, to ensure that you're not you're not over provisioned with more than resources than you actually need, but that you're also not under provisioning as well. So you need to keep an eye on that. I've got one client, he came to me after he tried to do it himself, and he got a $500 bill from Azure because he had allocated a resource that he didn't need. And so it can be a challenge when you're first getting into it. Expertise is another one. I keep saying you should go find a cloud solutions provider, especially if you're going to go into the infrastructure or platform as a service. They've got the expertise to know what resources to get, what level of resource to get, and things like that. Migration can be a challenge as well. And this is, again, having good IT expertise is very important. When we migrated, some of that Boy Scout stuff that I do, we migrated over 300 databases from our existing server and into our now cloud solution. That required some expertise, and to be honest with you, I did it, but I had never migrated 300 databases at any given time. But I had the knowledge to be able to go and at least find the right resources to get that done, because that can be a challenge. Another thing with migrations is that if you're in the cloud, say you go to Azure initially, you're not happy with that service for whatever reason, you decide to go to, say, an AWS or Google, another cloud solutions provider. It costs money to pull data out of Azure. And if you have a lot of data in there, it can cost you a lot of money to pull that out. So that's just another thing to keep in mind as well. Some larger organizations actually store their data in both AWS and Azure, so that they don't need to pull data out of either service, so that they can choose the right level of service for what they're trying to do. And then finally, complexity. You have an infinite amount of resource level, basically, when you go into the cloud. And you also have an infinite amount of services that you can choose from, which can drive systems to become very complex very quickly. And that's something that needs to be taken. You can take advantage of that, but at the same time, you have to ensure that you have the right documentation and you have the right people with the knowledge to be able to build that service, and ensure that you're not building some kind of Rube Goldberg machine that's going to, fail 20% of the time. And so that complexity can be a big challenge when going into the cloud. But that being said, you get access into all sorts of new offerings. You can think about your applications. You can think about the way your business works differently when you move into a cloud service. So now what? For most small businesses, I highly recommend you stay in the software as a service realm. Find companies that are reputable, of course. Find services that your business will work well with. They are the least technical, the least expensive. Take advantage of trials. Make sure it fits your business, and they're also very scalable. if you're a business that's growing and you need something more, some more tighter integration between applications and stuff, Lauren, if we can go to the next slide, then you should absolutely find a cloud solutions provider, because they can help you evaluate the options. They've got that technical expertise to ensure that your costs are managed, that the right security is in place, that the right resource level is selected, and the right service is selected, because there are so many different options out there between the different companies, and even within the same company, there's many different options. So at that point, that's when it's really important to go to a cloud solutions provider. I do have a client here. They're about a $7 million a year medical practice. They've got their internal electronic medical record system, but then they have 4 or 5 external providers that they're coupling all their patient data with. And so we've built applications to sync up data between all of these systems. So this is an example of, having you need a little bit of extra expertise, because now you have multiple systems that you want to talk to one another. And then if you need even more, this is where you're really trying to decide whether or not to build or not. Lauren, if we go to the next slide. I have these conversations with medium-sized businesses all the time, because they're trying to make the decision of, do you buy off the shelf or do you need to custom build something? And the question I always ask is, do you want your business to work around your software, or do you want your software to work around your business? And everybody wants their software to work around their business. They want that flexibility to make that work and not have to change your business practices based on whatever package you purchase. The reality is it's incredibly expensive to do, because now you're building. But that cloud service provider, that cloud solutions provider, software development firms, they've got some great specialties in place, specialists in place to be able to help minimize that expense, but at the same time be able to put that solution in place and maintain that solution, because it isn't just the outlay cost of, let's build this custom software. There's ongoing maintenance associated with that as well. So, and with that, I'll take any questions that you've got. I realize I've gone through a lot today. I'm just scratching the surface. Even after this session, feel free to email me or send me a message on Twitter. I'd love to have conversations about this. This is a passion of mine. I really think that, this allows my business. It allows lots of small businesses to thrive, because I didn't have to go spend $30,000 on a new server. I was able to go spend, for my business, I was able to go spend a few $100 a month on some services. So.
Well, I think this was very valuable information for a lot of our members, maybe not so much our corporate members, but I don't know, maybe you may have a different perspective on that. Do most corporations handle this all in-house and they have their own systems?
But yes, I mean, we walked into a couple corporations. I've done work even for like the Department of Education here in Tennessee, a couple years ago. So, there are large companies out there. They're in the cloud, that's what they do, but they wanted some help. And so, we came in and did that. My hope is, if you're not an IT person, you're able to walk away and walk into one of these meetings and somebody says, infrastructure as a service, or IaaS or PaaS or SaaS. Now you know what the term is, and you have a little bit of knowledge there to help drive that conversation.
Yeah. So I can think of corporations that would be on the cloud and using some of the big cloud servers or systems out there. Even universities. I know Google it was called Google Apps. Now it's Google Workplace. We use that. So the Chamber uses Google Apps for everything we do: Docs, Calendar, email, Drive. We use WordPress for our website.
Yep.
So we're using different features. And I know that Google, with that though, started doing it for universities. That universities moved all of their infrastructure over to Google. That seemed to me for a while to kind of own the system, but now I know Microsoft is up there again because they've moved to the cloud. which they weren't in before, where Microsoft Office synced with cloud service, correct?
Yeah. So the Boy Scouts, that volunteer work that I do, we move them into Azure and on Office 365. If you are
Azure, is that what, when you refer to Azure, that is Microsoft?
Yes. So Microsoft Azure, that's their big infrastructure as a service cloud offering. And in fact, when you buy Office 365, it's actually running on Azure. So you can buy a SaaS solution that is running on an infrastructure solution. If you're a nonprofit, go to any of these companies, especially the larger ones. They have some great offerings. Google, I know. So the Boy Scout stuff, we have some stuff in their Google Workplace platform. A lot of our email and things like that flow through there. We also are on Azure, and I know Azure, we get $3,000 a year in credit to spend for free from Microsoft. Let's see here. The Google offering, all of our licenses are free on Google, and we have unlimited space. We have terabytes and terabytes worth of data up on Google. Microsoft does something similar.
We have the nonprofit version of Google, so we don't pay anything except for like premium services.
Yeah, and that's great. We also have Atlassian. If you're more of a tech company, sort of Atlassian, or doing some kind of tech thing, Atlassian is another great SaaS solution. You get a 75% discount if you're a nonprofit. So a lot of these companies, especially for nonprofits, they offer some great discounts, and I, say take advantage of them. When we moved the Boy Scouts over, we were spending about $22,000 a year on our servers sitting in a data center in Michigan. We moved into Microsoft, and our first year, I think our IT costs dropped down to about $16,000 before the $3,000 credit. So, yeah, so we significant savings, and in fact, we got better service support, reliability, all at a significant savings.
So if somebody's looking to move to the cloud, where do they start? Is it looking at, I would assume Microsoft and Google are the two big ones and the easiest kind of jumping off point, or where do people begin the process?
So if you're looking to, say, move your Office, your email, and things like that into the cloud, Microsoft and Google, by far, are the big heavyweights. I'm partial to Microsoft. To be full disclosure, we're a Microsoft partner here. We're actually a silver level partner with them, so we do sell a lot of those services. Google has a great offering also. I do think Google does a better job with the collaboration side than Microsoft does, but they're slowly catching up. But go and evaluate these solutions. You can get trials for all of them, and you can go in and truly evaluate them, see which one meets your business goals the best. And then from there, you can either go find a partner. I know, my company, we have a lot of company. We've got one company that has 3 licenses with Microsoft. And so we serve all sizes, and, it works well for them. And in fact, they're a defense contractor too. So there's a lot of compliance work that we have to do just for those 3 licenses to make that work. But it allows them that mobility and flexibility.
So I've heard some people cautious of going to the cloud in case the internet goes down, or if there's security breaches or data breaches, they don't have control of that. Sometimes I've heard people point to when Amazon or other large servers went down and it knocked out lots of big companies and their websites. What does that look like? Is that a concern? Is that a valid concern, or is that very sporadic, that hardly ever happens? And what's the level of security with these larger companies?
Yeah, it's a very valid concern. Microsoft has had 2 relatively large outages in the last 6 months. They've been slowly rolling out a fix for all of it, and so fingers crossed they've resolved the issue. But it is an absolute valid concern, because if you go down, or if they go down, you go down, basically. And you're a small, especially if you're a small business, you're a small fish in that pond. And so if you, but But at the same time, if you're looking to host it yourself, you also have the concern of, well, what if your server goes down? How are you going to deal with that as well? And so it's a risk, but I would say it's probably about the same risk as if your system goes down. So it exists, but at the same time, it is relatively infrequent. Most of the time, the way these platforms roll out features and stuff is they stagger them. So if there is an issue, it's a limited rollout and has a limited impact. It's rare that a whole platform will be down. Unfortunately, the one in March caused almost the entire Microsoft ecosystem to go down for a number of hours. But it comes back up relatively quickly. Again, they've got the resources. They've got all those smart people working there to make sure, because it isn't just you or me. I mean, if you're working for a large corporation, I mean, Netflix relies, I think, on AWS for delivering a lot of their content, as an example. So they're a big, customer of Amazon. So Amazon in particular wants to make sure they don't go down. So yeah. I don't know what the US would do if we lost Netflix for a few hours.
That's right. All right, so I'm ready to move to the cloud. I kind of understand what it is. I choose Google or Microsoft. What then is the next kind of step? Like, I'm trying to think of a small business to kind of wrap their head around the cloud and the progress or transition into moving to the cloud or understanding it more. They could definitely reach out to a company like yours. But what do you recommend? Is there one like bang for the buck move to the cloud that you tell people to go to first?
I tell people go to the Office or the workspace productivity solutions. That's going to be your biggest bang for your buck.
What's your next recommendation after that?
After that, it's for most businesses, it's then if you're trying to get find a solution. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you're looking to grow your sales, go find a CRM solution. There's plenty out there.
CRM stands for
customer relations management. So a HubSpot or Zoho has an offering. Salesforce has a big offering. Those big companies. Again, it's all about what you're trying to accomplish. If you're looking to, for instance, my company, we're going to be launching a product pretty shortly, and we needed to find a way to easily disseminate documentation and stuff. So we found a company called Help Scout. And we pay them, I forget what it is. I think we pay them $120 a year for the service. And we're able to put documentation up there. People are able to send support tickets in. It all depends on what you're trying to do. I guarantee you, whatever your problem is or that you're trying to solve for your business, there is a software solution out there for it that you can go and purchase relatively inexpensively.
And I liked your tip at the beginning where you said, try it out. We have tried a lot of things here at the Chamber to see what kind of works and tries to make our jobs easier with handling data and workflow and things. And we've tried a lot. We've only invested in a few because you get to a point and you're like, is this really worth it? We can't live without some of them, but there are others that we were like, it doesn't do enough to.
And that's the other thing. Don't just go out and buy a solution right off the bat and then you end up with 15 solutions, and unfortunately then your costs skyrocket because now you're getting cut death by 1,000 cuts basically. So you need to be strategic when you're looking at these solutions, because a $10 here, $10 there a month can quickly add up into several $100s a month. So just like your streaming services at home, be strategic in which services you actually want to use. And
that's what I was thinking is you subscribe to YouTube TV, but then you add on HBO and Netflix and Hulu, and at some point you're spending $200 when you were trying to cut costs and save money. So it can add up. We have a question that's just come in from Elliot Noble Holt. He asks, what are your thoughts on Box.com? And then he also asked, and Dropbox. So I don't know Box.com, but is it like Dropbox where it's an online file storage?
Yes, both are great solutions. I know companies that use them. If you're using, for instance, Office 365 or even Google and stuff, my suggestion is to stay within one ecosystem.
So if you use Microsoft, stay with
Microsoft, and if you're using Google, stay with Google, because because as part of your fee to Microsoft or Google, you get a lot of storage space, and so my suggestion is to stay with one of those. Box and Dropbox, they've got some great offerings. There are definitely cases where, you know what, you need to use Dropbox or you need to use Box. Maybe you like it better than OneDrive or Google Docs, Google Drive. So, you know, it depends on what you want to do. But like I said, the data storage comes with these services, and so my feeling is stick with the ecosystem as long as it works.
Yeah, good question. What's your one software you can't live without? What's your one cloud software that you just could not function without? Don't use email because we all have to use it.
We all need that.
What's a fun one that people should go check out?
Let's see here. What do I use on a very regular basis? Unfortunately, I'm a software developer, so I have several pieces of software that I use on a very regular basis. That what would be a good one? I mentioned it before. Help Scout is really good. For if you're, even if, it's for any business. It's not just an IT thing. It's great for being able to put, documentation and other things up there. It has a great ticketing system. There is one that I use that I don't see very often. Check out Zoho's product line. They've got everything from CRMs to accounting software. And one thing I absolutely love, I used QuickBooks for years when I first started my company, and I switched to Zoho. It is substantially less in cost. You get basically the same feature set. But the thing that sold me on it was when I collect credit cards, all my business stuff goes through authorized.net, payment gateway. With QuickBooks, I had to go through their payment gateway. With Zoho, I go through my authorized.net, so everything flows through there now. And so for me, it's all about having that integration. I also use their CRM too, and it's a great brand. They've got some great tech. I would highly recommend checking them out. If you're a small business and you're not sure about if you want a CRM or not, they have a great package called Begin, and it's like $7 a month. It's super cheap. It has some great features in there. It gets you, you can put your toe in the water and see if you like it or not. So that's it. Yeah.
We did a couple of years ago. We did one of these on project management software. It was all about like technology helping you out. It was all cloud-based technology, but we talked about Basecamp, Trello, Google Calendar features. And so we should do another one on those now that you have so expertly explained the cloud-based system and kind of understanding where we live now. I do think it has been a fundamental shift to how we operate, where you don't have a program on your computer anymore. We're all just on the web with all of these things. It's come a long way in a short amount of time. And I look at the development over just the last year when we've all been in lockdown from COVID, how things have evolved. This was a really good Classroom Connect to understand kind of where we live now. And I'd love to have you back and have you start to work on a program for the fall about like actual tools. So
yeah, absolutely.
Showing how some of these tools work. So
yeah, no, I look forward to that. I mean, it's the collaboration benefit of putting your business in the cloud. I think outweighs the risks associated with it. And I know some people are, and I was one of them for a long time, was very hesitant about putting my data in somebody else's hands. But to be honest with you, you put the right security, turn on multi-factor authentication and things like that, your data will be secure, and you'll reap the rewards of that collaboration.
Well, thank you very much. I think with that, we are going to wrap up. Robert, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about the cloud and your company. Thank you for being a member and an LGBT certified business owner. This has been great.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I've loved doing this, and feel free to reach out, either email me or send me a message on Twitter. I'd love to continue the conversation.
We'll make sure to have your information out on the website, and you can connect to Southport Solutions with any cloud questions that you might have. Thank you again, Robert, for joining us today and talking about the cloud and doing this Classroom Connect. Well, what a month of programming here at the Chamber, and we're gearing up for a very busy month. We hope we'll see you in June at one of our 12 LGBT Chamber Pride events. We've got educational events, connection events, and we're still going to be working on advocacy. Thank you all for joining us today and being a part of the Nashville LGBT Chamber of Commerce. Have a great one.